The rain had stopped only moments before, but the cemetery still looked drowned in sorrow. Beneath a gray afternoon sky, one of the richest men in the city sat silently beside a marble gravestone, his expensive suit soaked with mud and tears. His billion-dollar company was thriving. His name appeared in magazines. His success inspired millions. Yet none of that mattered anymore. Because the only person he had ever truly loved was lying beneath the cold earth in front of him. Before we begin this touching story, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of love, comment, Heart Kindness Story below. Your support helps us bring more emotional stories to life. Nathaniel Cross had everything people dream about. Private jets, luxury homes, powerful connections, and a business empire worth billions. But every morning, he woke up feeling poorer than the day before. 3 years earlier, his wife, Serena, had died unexpectedly during a medical emergency. The loss shattered him in ways money could never repair. For 3 years, Nathaniel lived like a ghost. His mansion stood on a hill overlooking the city, yet it felt emptier than an abandoned building. Every room carried memories. Serena's favorite books remained untouched on the shelves. Her piano sat silent in the corner. Her photographs smiled from the walls while Nathaniel struggled to remember how happiness felt. The world admired his strength. His employees praised his leadership. Business magazines called him a visionary. But nobody knew that every evening he sat alone in darkness, staring at old photographs and wondering why success felt so meaningless. Every Sunday, he visited Serena's grave. The cemetery caretaker knew him well. Nathaniel would arrive carrying fresh white lilies, kneel beside the gravestone, and remain there for hours. He rarely spoke. Sometimes he simply sat and listened to the wind. On one unusually warm afternoon, something unexpected happened. As Nathaniel sat lost in grief, he noticed movement nearby. A young woman was standing several rows away, holding the hand of a little girl no older than 7. The child carried a small bouquet of wildflowers. Unlike most visitors, they weren't dressed formally. Their clothes were simple but clean. The little girl smiled at nearly every gravestone they passed. Nathaniel found it strange. How could a child smile in a place filled with sadness? As he watched, the girl accidentally dropped her flowers. The wind scattered them across the grass. Without thinking, Nathaniel stood and helped gather them. The little girl thanked him with a bright grin that seemed completely out of place among the graves. Her mother offered a polite nod. For a brief moment, Nathaniel felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Warmth. Not happiness. Not joy. Just a tiny spark of human connection. The woman and child returned to the grave they had come to visit. Nathaniel tried to ignore them, but his attention kept drifting toward their quiet presence. The woman looked exhausted. Not physically alone, but emotionally. Her shoulders carried the weight of someone fighting battles every day. The child, however, radiated light. She chased butterflies. She laughed at birds. She treated the cemetery not as a place of death but as a garden filled with memories. Before leaving, the little girl approached Nathaniel again. She looked at him carefully. Then she asked a question that caught him completely off guard. The innocent curiosity in her eyes reminded him of something Serena used to say. That children often see truths adults miss. The girl pointed toward the empty space beside him and wondered if he always came alone. Nathaniel found himself unable to answer. Her mother quickly apologized and guided her away. Yet as they disappeared down the path, Nathaniel couldn't stop thinking about the question. Did he always come alone? The answer was yes. Not just to the cemetery. To life itself. The following Sunday, Nathaniel returned as usual. To his surprise, the woman and her daughter were there again. This time he learned their names. The mother's name was Elara Quinn. The little girl was named Maisie. Elara visited her late father's grave every week. After losing her husband years earlier in a workplace accident, her father had become her greatest support. When he passed away, she and Maisie were left completely alone. Life had not been kind to them. Elara worked 2 jobs. She rented a tiny apartment. Bills constantly piled up. Many nights she skipped meals so Maisie could eat properly. Yet despite the hardships, bitterness never seemed to touch her heart. She carried herself with quiet dignity. Week after week, their paths crossed. Sometimes they exchanged brief greetings. Sometimes they sat on nearby benches. Nathaniel gradually found himself staying longer. The cemetery no longer felt as lonely. Maisie had a gift for making people smile. She told funny stories about school. She talked endlessly about animals she hoped to adopt one day. She described impossible inventions she planned to build when she grew up. And somehow, without realizing it, Nathaniel began looking forward to Sundays. For the first time in years, he had something to anticipate. One afternoon, heavy rain suddenly poured across the cemetery. Visitors rushed to their cars. Nathaniel noticed Elara struggling with a broken umbrella while trying to shield Maisie from the storm. Without hesitation, he offered them a ride home. The apartment building where they lived shocked him. The structure was old and worn. Paint peeled from the walls. The elevator barely worked. Yet inside their tiny apartment, he discovered something unexpected. Love. The space was small, but photographs filled every corner. Handmade drawings decorated the refrigerator. Books lined the shelves. Laughter echoed through the rooms. There was warmth there that his mansion had lacked for years. As Nathaniel drove home that evening, he felt strangely unsettled. How could people with so little possess something he had lost despite having everything? Months passed. A friendship slowly formed. Nathaniel helped Maisie with school projects. He occasionally brought groceries under the excuse of having extras. Elara resisted charity but accepted kindness. She valued dignity more than assistance. The more Nathaniel learned about them, the more he admired their resilience. One winter evening, Maisie became seriously ill. A severe infection required immediate treatment. Elara was terrified. Medical expenses threatened to overwhelm her completely. Nathaniel quietly arranged everything. The best doctors. The best care. No publicity. No recognition. Just help. When Maisie recovered, Elara discovered what he had done. For the first time since they met, tears filled her eyes. Not because of the money. Because someone cared. Someone had stepped forward when the world had turned away. Nathaniel expected gratitude. Instead, he received something far more valuable. Trust. As seasons changed, so did his life. The mansion no longer felt quite so empty. Fresh flowers appeared in the kitchen. Laughter occasionally echoed through the hallways. Maisie loved exploring the enormous gardens. She transformed forgotten corners into adventures. Even the household staff noticed the difference. The once silent billionaire smiled more often. His eyes looked alive again. Yet one question haunted him. Was he betraying Serena by moving forward? Every time happiness approached, guilt followed. One spring afternoon, Nathaniel visited the cemetery alone. He sat beside Serena's grave exactly as he had done for years. The wind moved gently through the trees. Sunlight filtered across the marble. For a long time, he remained silent. Then something shifted inside him. He realized that grief had become a prison. He had mistaken loyalty for suffering. Serena would never have wanted him trapped in loneliness forever. She had loved life. She had loved people. She had believed that hearts could heal without forgetting. For the first time, Nathaniel allowed himself to imagine a future. Not a replacement for the past. A continuation of life. Weeks later, while walking through a city park, Maisie suddenly took both Nathaniel's hand and Alara's hand. Children often do things adults spend years overthinking. As they walked together beneath blooming trees, strangers assumed they were a family. Instead of discomfort, Nathaniel felt peace. A simple, unfamiliar peace. Then came the moment that changed everything. One bright afternoon, all three visited the cemetery together. Nathaniel brought white lilies for Serena. Maisie carried colorful wildflowers. After placing the flowers beside the grave, the little girl looked up at him with complete sincerity. She asked whether lonely people could become families. The question struck him harder than any business negotiation, any financial challenge, or any public achievement. Because deep down, he already knew the answer. Family wasn't created by blood alone. It was built through love. Through showing up. Through choosing one another every day. Nathaniel looked at Alara. She looked back at him. Neither needed words. Years of pain, healing, friendship, and trust had already spoken. That evening, as the sun painted the horizon gold, Nathaniel made a decision. He would stop surviving and start living. He would honor Serena's memory not by remaining broken, but by embracing the future she would have wanted for him. The billionaire who once sat alone at a grave finally understood something priceless. Love does not end when someone leaves this world. It changes shape. It becomes memories. Lessons. Strength. And sometimes, when least expected, it becomes a second chance. Months later, laughter filled Nathaniel's mansion regularly. Maisie's drawings covered the refrigerator. Alara's presence brought warmth into every room. The house no longer felt like a museum of grief. It felt like a home. And every Sunday, they still visited Serena's grave together. Not out of sadness. But out of gratitude. Because without the love Nathaniel once shared, he might never have recognized the gift standing before him. Before we reach the end, if this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. Stories like these remind us that hope can appear even in our darkest moments. Special request, comment below, love finds a way, if you believe every broken heart deserves a second chance at happiness. As the years passed, Nathaniel often reflected on the day he met a struggling single mother and her cheerful daughter in a cemetery. He had arrived carrying grief. He left carrying hope. The grave remained a place of remembrance. But it was no longer the end of his story. It became the place where a new chapter quietly began. And sometimes, the greatest miracle isn't becoming a billionaire. Sometimes, the greatest miracle is finding a family when you thought you had lost everything. Because even after the deepest loss, life still finds ways to surprise us. And sometimes, all it takes is one kind heart to remind another heart how to beat again.